When you talk about having your own set of biases and our own worldview, like what the term is that we use at the agency is exactly that. We call it a worldview. That is your worldview. Your worldview is shaped by your religion. It's shaped by how you grew up. It's shaped by what neighborhood you went through puberty in. It's shaped by where you went to college. Your worldview is shaped by all of these different inputs, and it becomes the lens, like glasses, right? It becomes the lens that you see everything through. So I'm sure you've met somebody who's very Christian. They see everything through a very Christian lens. I'm sure you've met people who are African American and they see the world through a very African American lens. I'm sure you've met people who are wealthy and they see the whole world through a very wealthy lens. All of that worldview is something that can be shaped and changed because your brain isn't as concrete as people think it is. The brain has a function called neuroplasticity, which means that it can be changed, it can be reframed, it can be reshaped, it can be programmed, deprogrammed, reprogrammed. So your brain is this very malleable thing. But what it takes to change it, which is the heart of your question, Doug, what it takes to change the way that your brain works, it takes new experiences and it takes a willingness to accept what's known as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when you learn something new that challenges part of your original worldview. So it's the very thing that most of us find very irritating about people who don't change. When you talk to somebody who's hyper Christian and you ask them questions about where their faith is in contradiction to their life, oftentimes what you find is that you make the person very defensive. What you're doing is you're introducing cognitive dissonance, but they're not open to that dissonance. So their neuroplasticity is not kicking in. Instead, they're rejecting that cognitive dissonance. They're doubling down or they're burying themselves even further in their entrenched beliefs and they're resisting change. The same thing happens in the workplace. The same thing happens in the family. The same thing happens in relationships. When people don't accept cognitive dissonance, they don't trigger that neuroplasticity, they don't change their worldview. So the number one thing to somebody who wants to change their worldview is you have to be willing to be open to those moments where new information challenges your fundamental beliefs. And you have to just take a second, literally it's moments of time, to consider the new information and consider how it challenges your original information and let that discomfort sit for a while instead of becoming defensive or rejecting it outright. As you go through that practice more and more, what you'll find is that it becomes easier and easier to accept new information and to start challenging your old beliefs based off of the new information so that you can come to a more complete point of view. Not necessarily that your worldview has to change, but that your worldview has to accept a new point of view in order to grow more confident, more capable, or more objectively accurate.